right now, most of us feel discomfort when we think about this scenario. And most of us feel discomfort when we think about. But just like we are not responsible for our feelings, we do not choose them, but we are responsible for our actions. And we must make a decision. It is in our responsibility to reflect and to overcome our negative feelings about pets and to treat them with the same respect we treat other people with. We should accept that pets are people who have not chosen their sexuality and who, unlike most of us, will never be able to live it out freely if they want to lead an upright life. We should accept that pedophilia is a sexual preference, a thought, a feeling, and not an act. We should differentiate between child. We shouldn't increase the suffering of pedophiles by excluding them, by blaming and mocking them. By doing that, we increase their isolation and we increase the chance of child.
Not gonna lie to you, that might be the most impressive way I've seen somebody try to shift the blame of a criminal act onto other people who have nothing to do with it. Because you mean to tell me I am somehow going to be at fault for not being welcoming and opening my arms to people who think about children, and when they're shunned and when they're all alone, the proper response in their mind is not to seek a little bit of therapy to get that stupid thought out of their head. Their correct response is to child. Yeah, that don't make any fucking sense whatsoever, especially when you factor in, I don't know, examples of people who've thought about this and acted upon it, which continues that negative stigma.
Former legislative candidate Joel Koskan is headed to prison. The former South Dakota legislative candidate was walked out of the courtroom in handcuffs after the judge sentenced him to 10 years in prison on charges. According to earlier court documents, the victim in the case was a child. Today's hearing came after a judge rejected a plea agreement in the case.
A particularly horrific case described by the prosecution as every parent's nightmare. It relates to 30-year-old Nathan Bennett, who worked at the Partu King Street Nursery in Bristol from July 2024. This began to emerge in February last year when parents of children at the nursery and indeed staff raised concerns. The manager of the nursery, Victoria Tutton, viewed CCTV footage of Nathan Bennett.
It's things you don't want happening to your children or any children at the hands of a grown adult.
Bennett was immediately sent home, and Avon and Somerset police later arrested him at his home. The nursery itself in the centre of Bristol here was subsequently shut down. Now, we've had 4 days of evidence last week here during the trial at Bristol Crown Court. The jury heard how staff had noted that Bennett would sit children on his lap for lengths of time, wearing trousers with holes in the and seemed territorial over certain toddlers and indeed their parents. One nursery practitioner who gave evidence here in court described how Bennett had a jealous attachment with 5 children and would take control of them. Now, this was an extremely distressing case for the jury to hear. Videos of 2 of the children, and these children were aged around 2 or 3 years old, were played in the case, referred to only as Child A and Child E. Child E's mother gave evidence telling the jury her son had demonstrated how he'd been abused. The mother told the court, "I got him to stop doing it. I asked him when did that happen, and he said it happened at nursery." The prosecutor, Virginia Cornwall, described the case, as I say, as every parent's worst nightmare. And today, Nathan Bennett, who is 30, was found guilty of all 8 charges. There was 2 charges of and 4 charges of sexual. when dismissing the jury, the judge said that this was a case which involved the youngest children which he has ever dealt with, acknowledged the jury how distressing this case has been. We've also just had a statement from Avon and Somerset Police, who led the investigation. They described that Nathan Bennett was trusted to care for children but committed against the very young children at his place of work. An investigation involving such young children was deeply challenging and distressing for all concerned. I would like to pay tribute to the support and strength shown by those families. That's Temporary Detective Inspector Lucy Ford. Bennett will be sentenced on the 16th of March.
Dan.
Because who among thee would be proud enough to say in front of a crowd of people, hey, I like thinking about children? You will be shunned for that, because the immediate, proper, and correct response is to say, fuck you, you're a weirdo. You are not somebody who is normal. You need to seek a little bit of help. But because we live in a world where motherfuckers want to shame the common sense individual and not the motherfucker who needs to be shamed into doing something better with their life, we have a bunch of people dedicated to trying to make it seem like if you are not opening, you are somehow the problem. And I'm here to remind everybody, no. You can have all these types of moments in your life where you're trying to understand people and you're trying to be welcoming, but eventually you have a line that you know if somebody crosses, you're gonna have a fucking problem with it. And I would like to think, even though we've spent all these years together and I've said things you don't agree with and you've said things I don't agree with, there's a common understanding that the children should be left alone. It's embarrassing that this standard is being brought to my attention at the exact same time when I have to deal with an administration not really being forthcoming with information that pertains to children being violated. So across the board, I can't get behind any of this shit, because who among thee could actually want to harbor positive affirmation to somebody who thinks about it and acts upon it? Because you could call me hateful, you could call me ignorant. They're one and the same in my book, and I'll gladly have anybody disagree with me on it, because I am uncomfortable with anybody who acts upon it, and I'm uncomfortable with anybody who thinks about it. I want you to stomach how stupid I'm about to sound for like the next minute. You want me to understand that if I don't invite somebody who thinks about children to the cookout or to the party or to the club activity, they're gonna get revenge on me dating a kid I don't know. They're gonna, and as each, this is a horrible description, thrust pans out, it's just payback on me? No, absolutely not. Because none of that makes sense. It is completely ignoring the personal responsibility of somebody who's thinking about a criminal act and acting upon a criminal act and putting it on me. And it's not really something I'm going to stand for. It's not really something I'm going to agree with. And it will embolden me to shun motherfuckers more until they recognize that they need to go get some damn help. I can't be the one to help you, because the whole time I'm going to be side-eyeing you. My nieces will be nowhere near your simple ass, because your sexuality and your preference, that's another thing. You mean to tell me, as a grown adult, your preference, in light of all these different people who argue with each other about the preferences of tall, short, fat, skinny, black, white, you mean to tell me, in the midst of all that conversation and how dumb that is, you want to walk in and say, oh, my preference is kids? Get the fuck out my face. Not to mention, I made that video about that dumbass who thought it'd be a great idea to say that after a school shooting, the first victim was the shooter, and how stupid that was. That puts the blame of what happened to the kids on the kids. So if we circumvent this stupid conversation and apply it, you want me to believe that maybe a group of children who live in a small town, who were raised by their evil supremacist parents, that people who wrong and they somehow grow up to be 12 years old and they believe that, and then they get, that's somehow the child's fault. Once again, I don't want to live in this mindset of thinking that somehow blaming somebody is the perfect distinction and excuse for someone else to commit a criminal act, because it doesn't make any fucking sense. You know what? I get it. Everybody's got to have their own thoughts about things and think about ways to make the world better, think about ways to include people in the conversation. I get all that. But sometimes it's important to say shut the fuck up, because some people say some shit that just don't make any sense. Saying shut the fuck up doesn't really harm anybody. It just stops the stupid thought from being fully said out loud. That way everybody else don't have to stomach hearing some dumb, odd, slow malarkey. So, from me to that woman and to anyone who agrees with that woman, shut the fuck up, because you actually need to address the problem before you start coming at people like me for not opening my arms and welcoming absolutely everybody. Because the minute you start welcoming everybody, it's the moment motherfuckers start feeling comfortable to do something under the radar, and I will not have that on my conscience. No way! Because I don't want to associate with anybody who thinks or acts upon children. And if you disagree with me on that, that's fine. Shut the fuck up talking to me. Subscribe to the channel. I will see you all in the next one. Mwah! Goodbye.